The night was calm, but inside his heart a storm was raging. A storm made of longing, hope, and an ache that words alone could barely hold. Sheikh Hamdan stood beneath the vast Dubai sky, its stars like scattered diamonds, and he whispered to the wind as if it could carry his plea to the one who held his soul. "Please accept me," his heart cried in silence, for it was not just a request, but the raw truth of a man who had found in her a world far greater than all his titles, his wealth, or his crown. His voice was the tremor of a dream on the edge of reality, a poem that sought not applause but a place to belong, in her heart. In the stillness, he imagined her eyes, deep as the desert night, holding galaxies that no astronomer could chart. Every glance from her was a prayer answered, every smile a sunrise breaking through his darkest hours. He wanted to tell her that his heart had been searching for hers long before they had met, and when fate had finally brought her near, the world felt less like a battlefield and more like a garden in spring. His plea was simple yet eternal: "Please accept me, not as a prince, but as a man who trembles in your presence." He knew that the world saw him as unshakable, a leader, a poet, a rider of storms, but beneath that image was a man who feared rejection more than war, who would surrender every palace just to walk beside her in the ordinary streets of life. In his poem, he confessed that every achievement, every victory, was hollow if it could not be celebrated with her hand in his. "I am not asking you to love my name," he would say, "only to see the man behind it, the man whose heart beats faster every time yours comes near." The words poured out like water breaking free from a dam. He spoke of how her presence had taught him the meaning of patience, the beauty in silence, and the courage to kneel, not in defeat, but in devotion. He told her that she was the poem he had been trying to write his entire life, the verse that made every other line make sense. His voice trembled with humility, for love is not a demand but a gift, and he feared asking too much. Still, his heart insisted, "Please accept me, for I have nothing left to give except everything I am." Every letter of his poem carried a truth sharper than any sword. That power fades, crowns tarnish, and empires fall, but the heart's longing remains timeless. He admitted that he was not perfect, that there were cracks in his soul, but he hoped she could see beauty in the brokenness, just as the moon finds beauty in its shadows. For in her eyes, he had seen the reflection of a man he wanted to become, a man worthy of her trust, her laughter, and her forever. He recalled the first moment their hands had brushed, an accidental touch that sent 1,000 untamed horses galloping through his veins. In that instant, he knew he was no longer free, not in the way people imagined, but bound willingly, joyfully, to a destiny that carried her name. His poem was not written in ink, but in the silent vows his heart had taken without her ever asking. "Please accept me," he whispered again, "for without your yes, my world is only half alive." The desert winds carried his words far into the night, as if the sand itself longed to deliver them to her doorstep. He dreamed of her reading his poem under the soft glow of a lamp, her lips curling into that rare smile that could calm oceans. He prayed that she would understand the weight of each syllable, not as a burden, but as an offering. Every verse was a key, and together they unlocked the door to his most vulnerable self. He spoke of wanting to walk with her through the markets, to taste the same street food, to laugh over the same clumsy moments. He told her how much he longed to hear her thoughts, not just on love, but on life, faith, and the strange way time seems to disappear when they are together. "Please accept me," he wrote, "because with you, I am not a ruler or a poet. I am simply a man who has found his home." In the poem's quiet middle, he confessed a truth he had never spoken aloud. That he had been lonely even in rooms full of people, that his laughter had sometimes been an armor, and his poems a way to speak without revealing too much. But she had changed that. She had looked past the gold and the guards, the speeches and the ceremonies, and had seen him, the boy who once dreamed under the same stars that now bore witness to his plea. He promised her that his love was not the kind that fades when beauty changes or when life becomes difficult. His love, he vowed, was the kind that would fight storms, that would choose her again and again, even on days when the world was unkind. "Please accept me," he urged, "for I will protect your heart as if it were my last kingdom, and I will guard it with more loyalty than any crown I have ever worn." He painted images of a shared life, late-night conversations, journeys to places only they would know, the building of a home filled not with gold but with laughter. He imagined writing her poems in the sand, knowing the tide would take them away, yet trusting that the words would remain carved in her soul. For love, he believed, was not about permanence in stone, but permanence in memory. The ending of his poem was not a conclusion, but an open door. He left space for her answer, for her to write her own lines between his, for their voices to blend into a duet the world had never heard before. His final words were the softest, yet they carried the weight of 1,000 promises. Please accept me, not because I am perfect, but because in your love, I am willing to become better every day. As the dawn began to break over the city, Sheikh Hamdan closed his eyes, letting the light wash over him like a blessing. He did not know if she had heard him, if the winds had carried his poem to her, but he knew he had spoken from the deepest part of his soul. And sometimes, that is all a man can do: lay down his heart and hope it is received with the same tenderness with which it was given. And so, the poem remained in the air, a whispered prayer between heaven and earth, waiting for her to take it into her hands. Whether she would accept him or not, he knew he would love her until his last breath, for love like this was not something that could be turned off. It was eternal, written into the very fabric of his being. Yet still, in the quietest voice, as if speaking to her spirit, he repeated the words that had begun it all. Please, accept me. The night after he let the poem drift into the unseen corridors of destiny, Sheikh Hamdan found himself restless. The palace was silent, yet inside him, every thought of her was a wild drumbeat. He wandered the marble halls, his bare feet echoing faintly, and imagined her smile lighting up the darkness. His heart replayed his words like an endless prayer, each, please accept me, carrying more hope than the last. Even the moon seemed closer that night, as if leaning in to listen to the secret love of a man who had given his soul away without regret. In his solitude, he began to imagine her response. Would she write him a letter, soft and delicate, with words that would make his knees weaken? Would she meet him in the gardens where the roses bloom in the early hours of the morning, her hair dancing with the breeze? Or would she remain silent, leaving him in the sweet agony of not knowing? These questions were his only company, but he embraced them, for they kept her presence alive in every breath. He stood at the palace balcony, gazing over the sleeping city, and whispered her name into the wind. The air carried it over rooftops, deserts, and seas, perhaps even to her resting place. He wondered if she felt it, a gentle tug at her heart, as if someone somewhere was thinking of her so deeply that the universe could not help but listen. His life had been filled with grandeur, but never had something so simple. Just the thought of her felt like his greatest treasure. His mind wandered to the first time he saw her truly laugh, the kind of laugh that reached the eyes and spilled over like a river breaking free. That memory alone had the power to break his defenses, to undo the careful mask he wore before the world. In that moment, he was not a crown prince, nor a poet admired by thousands. He was simply a man who wished to be the reason she laughed like that forever. And so his heart pleaded once more, in silence, please accept me, so I can spend my life protecting that smile. The days that followed were like a poem stretched across time. Each sunrise felt like an unanswered question, each sunset like a promise that tomorrow might bring her answer. He continued writing, not knowing if the words would ever reach her, but feeling compelled to create as if her heart depended on them. Sometimes, he would write verses so tender that even he could not read them without a catch in his voice. Other times, his pen would falter, and he would simply stare at the paper, lost in the shape of her imagined presence. One evening, he decided to walk among the people, blending quietly into the crowd. He visited the souk where the aroma of spices filled the air and the laughter of strangers warmed the night. He imagined her beside him, tasting the same sweets, bargaining with the same merchants, her voice weaving into the rhythm of life around them. The vision made him ache in the most beautiful way, for it reminded him that love was not just about grand gestures but about sharing the smallest, most ordinary moments. When he returned to the palace, the silence seemed even heavier. Yet in that stillness, he found a kind of devotion that did not need noise. He lit a single candle and placed it beside the poem he had written for her. The flame flickered, casting shadows that danced along the walls, as if even the darkness wished to join in his longing. If this love is meant to be, he thought, then every breath I take will guide me closer to her heart. Days turned into weeks, but his faith did not falter. He carried her in the way a poet carries a secret metaphor, hidden yet woven into every line of life. He saw her in the reflection of the sea, in the flight of falcons over the dunes, in the first drops of rain blessing the desert. Everything reminded him of her, and instead of resisting it, he welcomed it, for it kept his hope alive. One night, in a dream, she came to him. Her voice was like the softest wind, her touch like the warmth of a sunbeam after rain. She did not speak of acceptance or rejection, only placed her hand in his, and in that silent gesture, he felt understood. He awoke with a tear on his cheek and a heart so full it felt as if it could burst. Whether the dream was real or imagined, it became the most sacred memory he held. The following morning, he wrote again. But this time, his words were not filled with desperate pleading. They were filled with gratitude, for having met her at all, for having known what it was like to love someone beyond titles or possessions. His lines carried peace, as if he had realized that love was not only about being chosen, but also about choosing to keep loving, no matter the outcome. Still, there were moments when the ache returned, sharp and sudden. It would come when he passed a garden where jasmine bloomed, or when he heard a melody that reminded him of her. In those moments, he would return to his balcony, place his hand over his heart, and whisper the same 3 words that had started it all. They had become less a request and more a prayer. Please accept me, not just into her life, but into the eternity they might share beyond this world. He began to imagine what it would feel like to hear her say yes. Not in a grand hall with 1,000 witnesses, but in a quiet space, where only the sound of their breathing filled the air. He imagined the softness in her eyes, the tremble in her voice, the way her hand might rest gently in his. That vision alone gave him the strength to keep waiting, for some answers are worth a lifetime of patience. In time, he realized that whether or not she ever spoke those words, her presence had already transformed him. She had stripped away his pride and left him with something far greater, humility in love. She had taught him that the most powerful man is the one who kneels willingly before the one he loves, offering not commands but his heart. And so, under the same Dubai sky where his first plea had been whispered, he closed his eyes and smiled faintly. The stars above glimmered like the lines of an unfinished poem, waiting for her to complete them. And with the same tenderness that had carried him through every sleepless night, Sheikh Hamdan spoke once more into the wind. Please accept me, and if you cannot, know that I will love you still.